Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee meeting held in the Council Chambers Civic Centre, 6 Patterson Street, Mundijong, on Monday, the 26th of May 2025. As presiding member, I declare the meeting open at 6 p.m. and would like to welcome the committee members and staff this evening. I'd like to acknowledge the Noongar people of the Budja, the land that we gather on today. For thousands of years, their connection to country has provided knowledge, guidance, spirituality and life. We pay our respects to this ongoing connection, as well as to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to advise that this meeting is being live streamed and audio recorded. No other visual or audio recording of this meeting by any other means is allowed. Agenda item number 1 for this evening is attendances and apologies. I do have 3 apologies, one from President Coles, one from Councillor Jarrett and one from Councillor Bishop. Agenda item number 2 on this evening's agenda is public question time. We have received a number of questions from Mrs. Rich. Mrs. Rich, would you like to come forward and ask your questions?
Good evening, councillors, committee members and officers. My first question this evening is, given that council as a collective holds decision-making power over budget allocations, rates and financial prioritisation, and that concerns have been raised in the community about the Shire's long-term financial sustainability, can the committee advise whether the capability and financial literacy of elected members, particularly as it relates to interpreting financial data, budgets and implementation of long-term financial plans, has been identified, assessed or quantified as a strategic risk in the Shire's risk register? If not, why not?
Thank you for your first question. I will look to the Director of Corporate Services for a response.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mrs. Rich. So Risk 1 states that the change in financial capacity impacting service or project quality and delivery on the strategic risk register is assessed as significant. So the following actions are proposed to further reduce this level of risk, and that being a review of the rate strategy and a review of the overhead allocation methodology. Further, the Local Government Act reforms will require Council to appoint an independent presiding member and deputy presiding member on a newly named Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee. That'll replace this committee, which is aimed at enhancing local government's financial management capabilities, amongst other things. And in addition to that, the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee, make this point, the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee can make recommendations to Council regarding the register that they see pertinent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Mrs. Rich, your second question.
My second question this evening. Several findings from the 2021 Regulation 17 review, including operational risk management actions and the finalisation of the integrity framework, remain incomplete as of 2025. Can the committee confirm exactly how many open findings from the previous review are still unresolved, what their original due dates were, and provide a commitment to publish a list of overdue items and their updated completion dates in the next quarterly risk report?
Thank you for your question, Ms. Rich. I will advise we'll take that question on notice and a response will be provided. Your third question this evening.
Thank you. My third question. The revised risk appetite statement increases the maximum tolerable impact on social and community outcomes from minor to moderate. Considering the increased funding and staffing to the Community Directorate, can the committee confirm what specific community risks, decisions or projects this change was intended to accommodate, and whether a community impact assessment or consultation was conducted before endorsing a broader tolerance for risk in this area.
Thank you for your third question. And again, I'll look to the Director of Corporate Services for a response.
Thank you, Chair. So the revised officer recommended risk appetite is still low. The changes in the moderation of the low from minor to moderate consequence, which will only be tolerated in a rare or unlikely likelihood. So, for example, the Shire often commences roadworks across multiple suburbs contained within a single ward, but continues to do so as the community benefit outweighs the temporary inconvenience. Under the previous risk appetite, this would not be able to happen. So the community provides an extensive array of feedback to the Shire, and this is used by the Executive to inform deliberations and recommendations to the risk management. For example, community perception surveys, facility user group survey, green spaces maintenance level survey, CRM feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And that was the last of the questions that we had. We will move on to agenda. Well, no, we won't actually move on to the next agenda item. We did receive an email this afternoon asking for a public statement. Public statements are not listed as an agenda item on tonight's agenda. However, I will look to put it to the committee to put forward a motion to open the meeting for public statements if we should wish to. Would I have anybody that would like to put forward a motion as such? Councillor Duggan.
Thanks, Councillor Mack. I'm happy to put forward a motion to allow a public statement this evening.
And do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Mazzini. Are we happy that the motion as it reads will be satisfactory for the purposes of the minutes? You happy with that? And Councillor Duggan, you happy with what's on the screen? Councillor Mazzini. Wonderful. Is anybody opposed to the motion? That being the case, the motion is carried unanimously. And I will call for Mrs. Michelle Rich to come forward with your statement.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My statement this evening is as follows. I'd like to raise a concern that I believe speaks to the heart of financial risk management in the Shire, not within the administration, but within the council itself. It is well understood that financial sustainability is now a pressing issue for the Shire. Long-term forecasts, infrastructure funding gaps, and increasing service demands are already stretching resources thin. In this context, strategic decision-making around budgets, rates and capital works is more important than ever. Yet despite this, there appears to be no meaningful consideration, at least none disclosed publicly, of the risk posed by capability gaps within the council body itself, particularly regarding financial literacy and the ability to interpret complex budgets, financial plans and audit reports. This is not a criticism of individual elected members, but it is a systematic governance issue when those charged with approving multi-million-dollar budgets and long-term financial strategies may not consistently possess the skills or confidence to do so with informed scrutiny. We would expect this type of capability risk to be assessed and mitigated in any other part of the organisation with financial delegations of this magnitude. Why not here? The risk register outlines threats like digital security, project overruns, and climate impact. But what about the strategic risk of decisions made without adequate understanding of financial implications? What about the cumulative risk of short-term political decision-making overriding long-term fiscal planning? It's not enough to rely on officer advice if there's no assurance that advice is understood, interrogated and translated into sound governance decisions. Nor should we be content with induction sessions or ad hoc training as a substitute for structured, ongoing capability development and, most importantly, risk acknowledgement. I urge this committee to consider whether the absence of elected member capability risk in the strategic risk register is a blind spot. And if it is, I urge you to close it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rich. That is the end of the statements that we have received. So we'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is deputations, of which there is nil. Agenda item number 4 is declarations of committee member and officer interests, which I have received nil. Mr. Acting CEO, none, nil. We can move on to agenda item number 5, which is receipt of minutes or reports and consideration of adoption of recommendations from committee meetings held since the previous council meetings. 5.1, minutes of the previous Audit, Risk and Governance Committee meeting. 5.1.1, Audit, Risk and Governance Committee meeting held on the 24th of February 2025. Do I have a mover for those minutes? Mrs. Newby, and a seconder, Mr. Corelli. Is anybody opposed? That is carried unanimously. This brings us to agenda item number 6, which is reports for consideration. 6.1, Strategic Risk Register Review 2025. Do we have any questions from the floor with regards to this agenda item? Ms. Newby.
I'm sorry, given that we've just done an extensive review of here, but I went back through it again, trying to look at it with a different lens. Item number 2, which is about infrastructure capacity and service. In that one there, we're talking about the actions that we're doing within that is more or less all related to Mundajong. And I'm just wondering about other areas and the internet, whether we should be referring to it under there as well. Right. I just would suggest that we give that some consideration.
Yeah. I'll ask the Acting CEO to answer.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson. Could the member just point me specifically to the row and the column that you're referring to?
Yes, it's risk reference number 2, and it is infrastructure, capacity and service. It's the social and community needs to be livable. And the reason why I just thought of things like the internet, because my internet had fallen out at the time, it really is a major impediment as far as education is concerned, for businesses and all of those. And I wonder if it was one of those that we need to consider, and it also affects things like when we've got bushfires, just in the communications, whether we should consider that under there, because it is a significant risk. And I just wondered why we were just focusing at the moment. It's not in any of our controls, and it's not in those actions that we're looking at.
Acting CEO.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that is what I believed I was hearing. It's a very pertinent observation. About 18 months ago, this issue was very live for the council. Council actually had a number of subsequent applications for telecommunication infrastructure. And arising out of that was a request for a policy review. And so we undertook a review of our local planning policy regarding telecommunications infrastructure. And one of the very aspects that was added in was exactly what you're discussing. That is, in newly developing areas, what we were finding was not enough forethought was given to where telecommunications infrastructure may be needed. So we made that a very clear matter to be addressed. For areas outside the development footprint, it is more challenging. We do have that wicked problem of, I guess, not necessarily having telcos receiving the request from their customers for better coverage and thus voluntarily investing in that infrastructure. We have federal government programs, mobile black spot programs, that we certainly make applications for. So I think there is certainly at the administration level, there is a strong focus on data needs as being a really important, almost like an essential aspect of our ability to transact and perform functions, education, interactions with government and the like. If you wanted to add a further action, from what I'm hearing, if you were wanting to add that into the action sort of column and maybe a more bespoke action that focuses on telecommunication coverage, that's certainly something you could propose for the committee to consider. And I'd certainly be happy to assist with some wording if that assists.
Look, I think it went beyond the internet, though, and telecommunications. I just thought, I was just using that really as an example. I think it's an important example and something we should probably, look at as an individual thing. But I was just intrigued that we only seem to be covering Mundajong in there, because I'm sure there's other infrastructure capacity and service which affect the whole area. We're quite a big shire lengthwise, and we stretch out over that area. And I just thought perhaps we should give a little bit more thought to what else we should be looking at as far as what's impeding us achieving our outcomes, if you like, that we weren't considering it. I just thought it was a little narrow. I think Mundajong's just too narrow within that one. And I was just requesting if we could have a look at that. I mean, I'm happy to put it on the agenda for the next meeting for something that we look at. It's a suggestion of a way forward with this, because we can sit here all night and talk about it, and I'm not suggesting we do that. I just would like it opened up though, a little.
Snippy, I guess I'll add to that, just to leave that with you, whether you wanted to add it as a third point or whether you wanted to add it into any potential motion you might wish to move at the end.
Well, if you like, I could just, when we come to the end, when we look at the motion, if perhaps we could incorporate it to have a look at some of these risks to see whether they should be enhanced and widened a little bit from where they are.
Absolutely. Was there any further questions?
Yes, under number 3, which is the political and stakeholder relations, I just feel we can probably update this, because we've got number 1 action, determine priorities for next state government election advocacy, and we're going to do that by June 2026. Well, given that the next election is really 4 years away, I think perhaps we should have a look at those dates. It just seems... I didn't know whether those dates had been updated. I haven't got the marked up copy. I hadn't, but it just seemed a little early.
I'll look to, I've got Director of Corporate Services or the Director of Community Engagement. Director of Community Engagement.
I had intended just to give a little bit more colour to the prior question, and only to say that Mundajong has become the development front for this shire and appears to be going to be the answer to the housing crisis. And so we only have limited resources to devote to all of these things. So yes, at this moment there is a focus on Mundajong, but that doesn't always need to be the case.
And Director of Community Engagement to the recent question.
Thank you, through you, Chair. The Shire's experience with election advocacy is that understanding what the council and community priorities are well in advance of the election cycle is critical for us to do the relevant planning and advocacy for those projects. So while I do acknowledge that it might seem, I guess, quite soon that we're looking to lock in our advocacy projects for the next round of state and federal government election, if there is any new projects that are identified by council, we would need to undertake the relevant project development business case and costings to inform that advocacy, and that work can sometimes take at least at a minimum of 12 months, if not 2 years. So that's why we're recommending that we explore those advocacy priorities over the next 12 months and have them confirmed by council by the end of next financial year, also acknowledging that federal election is on a 3-year cycle, so by June next year would be less than 2 years out from a federal election to occur.
It was just this one specifically said the state government. That was all. That first one. Yeah, it was referring to the state one. But through the chair, are we saying that we're looking at them both together, both federally and state? Well, perhaps we can put that as federal and state.
Yes, I think that's a good observation, and traditionally that is what we have done, is had similar election priorities for both state and federal. So if the committee was minded, that wording could be updated to reflect the next state and federal government election advocacy.
That's the other's mine. I won't worry tonight.
And no further questions then? Mr. Crelly.
Thank you. I have 2 questions tonight. The first is on Risk 8, Digital Transformation and Security. I note that we've got item 1 due on the 30th of June this year, just seeking an update and whether there will be an update provided to the committee before the next meeting.
Director of Corporate Services.
So, I believe that we have finished the item, the backup and storage system, but I was approving a purchase order about a week ago for a final piece. I'm not sure whether they've got that in yet. As to an update, I can provide that at the next meeting. That's no problem.
Thank you. And the other is a general question around the caretaker provisions that will come into effect later this year during the local government elections. Just a general question for the committee. What controls has the council put in place to ensure that there's no interruption to service? Because my understanding is that it prevents the council from doing quite a lot of things at that time.
Director of Corporate Services.
So we have developed internally a very extensive policy regarding caretaker provision. It's been circulated to exec to read. It is very heavy reading. So, you know, the Act is quite short to read, but the policy is about 10 pages long and tries to cover all of the process and consequences of this caretaker provision. So that'll be presented to council prior to the caretaker provisions commencing.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Is there any further questions from the floor? There being no further questions, would any committee members like to put forward a motion?
I guess what I'm saying is that we've got option 1, and I just have the first one's the easiest one. With the well, it's going to be option 2, isn't it? Sorry. Endorses it as contained with the following amendments. I'm proposing that we, for risk number 3, which is political and stakeholder relations, action 1, we say federal and state government, so we capture both there. And for number 2 is that we ask the executive to consider whether we should include other areas of infrastructure, e.g. internet and telecommunications.
Ms Nivy, are you happy with the wording as it reads on your screen? Oh.
Yeah. It wasn't just other location, it was other infrastructure. It doesn't need to be location-based. It just happens to be location-based in here at the moment, but I think it's just other infrastructure in addition to the actions for Mundajong included in the action list. I mean, there's something there for Byford as well, but it's... Yeah.
I'll look to the acting CEO just to perhaps help with some additional wording
Some
there.
words.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairperson. So the more specificity we have is useful. I would just like to echo that the work that I've personally done in partnership with the CEO, for example, the power upgrades for Byford and Mundajong, that is been of significant strategic consequence for our Shire. There was a serious issue being faced with the ability to continue to grow our Shire due to the nature of our power infrastructure that we were facing, and that resulted in interventions, but also close collaboration with UDIA and developers. I would agree with my colleague that Mundajong is the focus for the $500 million infrastructure fund that the state government already have on their books. I would certainly believe that we cannot wait until an election for this. We need to be advocating each and every week on matters which are clearly aligned with government policies. So I would be focused on keeping the specificity around Mundajong, because that is addressing one of the most significant strategic issues facing the nation. If there is other infrastructure to focus on in other areas of the Shire, I guess I'm in the hands of the committee. I would just appreciate sort of some specificity about that. Is it local roads? If it's not roads, is there something else of particular interest? If it's digital connectivity, then that's, I think, got a good degree of specificity about it, but I would just recommend it would be useful and helpful to have greater clarity on that point.
Look, I wasn't advocating that we take Mundajong out, and I understand the importance of that of that area. All I was saying is that we have other issues around infrastructure within the Shire, and I think because this risk is for the Shire and not just for part of the Shire, I was just asking that whether we could open up that risk to include other things that we mightn't even identified yet.
Are you happy with the wording of point 4 as it is there, that would allow for?
Yeah, well, look, I'm in the hands of the committee. It's just important to be able to report on our actions. So, yeah, if I just echo it's obviously useful to have specificity around any infrastructure that is of particular interest to the committee. That will help in shaping the internal resources to address that request.
Ms. Nibia, you're happy with that wording? And
I
Yep.
am. I mean, as I said, I was only using internet as an example of the type of infrastructure.
Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Chair. It does just say review, it doesn't say do.
Sure.
So we can live with that, that's fine.
Is there a seconder for the motion before us? Mr. Corelli. Is anybody opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. This takes us to agenda item 6.2, which is Regulation 5 and Regulation 17 Review 2025. Do we have any questions from the committee with regards to this agenda item? There being no questions, would any... Oh, sorry, Ms. Newby, questions?
Look, it was just about the ones that we haven't done, like I understand why they haven't, it's impossible to do them all, and they are semi-minor. I wondered if we could please have a timetable developed to show just a timeline, approximate timeline of when we'd be working towards those items.
Director of Corporate Services.
Actually, can I just defer that to the Manager of Corporate Performance?
Sure.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, point 3 of the officer recommendation is intended to do that. At the next meeting, we will provide an update against all audit recommendations, including their due date and their status.
Thank you, Ms. Newby. Any further questions? There being no further questions, would any committee members like to move a motion? Councillor Duggan, the officer's recommendation.
Yes, thanks.
Do I have a seconder of the motion? Ms. Newby, is anybody opposed to the motion? Motion is carried unanimously. This brings us to agenda item 6.3, update on internal audit programs. Do we have any questions with regards to this agenda item? Ms. Newby.
Oh, it's just basically about the audit findings about the updated documents. Policies are always wonderful, aren't they? I know in all the boards that I sit on, we have them sitting on the board portal with a review date, when they were reviewed and when they're going to be reviewed. And that, we've found, is the best way to make sure we don't overlook them. And also, when we do review them, usually we find we can put 3 of them together in one policy. But I was just suggesting, because I know that they're going to be putting together a portal for documents, that perhaps we can put them on those so that we've got a list of all our policies with the review dates, and then we can, on a rolling basis, look at them and review them. It's just a suggestion. I know I'm not supposed to make suggestions. It's not a question.
Director of Corporate Services.
Can we have that done?
I might take that piece of that on notice, but we have literally reviewed every single policy in March, and we put them into a policy document. So every single document is in that policy manual, and the policy manual will be reviewed every 2 years. So, and the policies are on the internet as well, on our webpage. So the actual structure of how we present that manual, I'll take some time to think about that, but I do agree with the sentiment.
Thank you, Director. Any further questions? There being no further questions, would any committee members like to move a motion? Ms Newby? The officer's recommendation? Do I have a seconder for the motion? Mr Corelli, is anybody opposed to the motion? Motion is carried unanimously. This brings us to agenda item number 7, which is motions of which notice has been given, of which there is nil. Agenda item 8 is urgent business, of which there is nil. This brings us to agenda item 9, which is the closure of the meeting. There being no further business, I declare the meeting closed at 6:36 p.m. I'd like to thank all the staff and committee members and members of the public for their time tonight. Thank you.